So let's see. Oh, hello. Hi, can you hear me?
Yep.
Hi, I'm sorry. Thank you so much. I was just talking to talking to Christine Burns, a really famous activist for trans rights over in the UK, and she had like a lot of really good information. So that went over a little bit longer. But thank you so much for taking time out of your Saturday to come and talk to everyone. But
Sure.
just to be able to get things along, could you go ahead and please introduce yourself so to the people who may not know who you are in the audience?
Sure. I mean, is it going out live right now?
Oh yeah, no, we are live and we
Oh,
are
cool.
broadcasting on stream to
Oh,
about
nice.
100
Okay.
people.
All right. Excellent. Hi, everyone. My name is Brianna Titone. I'm the representative in House District 27 in Colorado and serving in my second term in that role.
That's absolutely amazing. And thank you so much for being willing to come out. I think that this is really cool as far as being able to talk to someone from our community who's able to go on to get involved at state politics. Recently, I mean, I told you a little bit about this during our conversation. I'm working, obviously, I can't say who publicly because I'm under contracts of confidentiality, but like I'm working at the state level right now for a state delegate and at the federal level. And so I think it's really cool to be able to get feedback from someone who's kind of, walked the walk and, gotten into an elected official or an elected position. So thank you so, so much. I really, really appreciate it.
Sure thing.
So I guess that the first place to start, for people who may not be aware of kind of your background and where you came from and your process in getting elected, where did you start? So you're in office right now. What led you to want to run for office?
Sure. It's kind of a little bit of a story to it. I didn't come out as trans until more recently, about 5 or 6 years ago. But I grew up in New York in a kind of rural area. I was a volunteer firefighter when I was a teenager and into college. And I really learned what the value of service to the community is all about. And through that, I always wanted to just be helpful. I wanted to do things and wanted to volunteer. I volunteered all the time for all sorts of different things. When I went to college, uh, the attack on the World Trade Center happened in 9/11. And being from New York, not from the city, but from upstate, and knowing a lot of people from the city, and New York City having a special place in my heart because I would visit it pretty often. It was, and being a firefighter and seeing a lot of the firefighters die in that attack as well, I felt like I wanted to do something. I wanted to I never wanted to see something like that happen again. But when I was in college, I was too young and inexperienced to do anything. I didn't want to get into the military because, deep down inside, I was a closeted trans person that didn't really understand like what I was even doing myself, and didn't feel like being owned by the military was something that I could do.
Yeah.
So fast forward to a bit farther down the line. I worked as a geologist. I'm a geochemist, and I worked in the mining industry. But when I moved out here to Colorado in 2008, I decided that it was the right time for me to apply for the FBI because that's what I really wanted to do. I wanted to be an FBI special agent. Felt like they had an anti-terrorism task force that I could join and kind of do what I needed to do in that area. Whether people knew about what I did or not didn't matter because I just wanted to do something good. And the FBI process is really long and drawn out. And I got too old ultimately to get in the FBI. So, I had my heart on that job and sacrificing a lot of myself and a lot of these suppressed feelings that I had for a job because I wanted to do good things for the country, for the people.
Yeah.
And when I got too old, I didn't know what else to do, and that's when I realized that I should probably, start looking into myself and figuring out what's really going on there. And then I came out as being trans,
Yeah.
and that kind of led to activism. I was part of a group of people who needed help, and I wanted to do so. I wanted to do those things.
Mhm.
So, being an activist and getting involved, fighting for bills that were being run at the House, uh, and someone just said, "Hey, you're really good. You're smart. You got a lot of experience behind you. You should run for office." And I was like, "I'm a trans person. Who's going to vote for me, right?" And that was before Danica Rome had won her election.
Mhm.
And then that November, I saw her win, and I said, "You know what? Yeah, let's do this. Let's run for office and let's make this happen." And it was that was the turning point. And then I could tell you all about the race and everything, but maybe that's another question you have for later.
Yeah, well, I mean, there's a couple things to break down there, but I mean, just on the Danica Rome aspect of it, I think that's really interesting, right? Because like I'm also like I'm not gonna lie, like for the longest time in my life, I've been wondering like, oh, could I be able to run for politics? Like I'd obviously been very passionate about it. I've been engaged in activism before I began law school and doing the things I'm doing now. Particularly in the South, working in a homeless outreach nonprofit as a program director. But I mean, previously, like there was a substantive part of my life where I was like, oh, that's too far out in the way. This is America. That like trans people are just beginning to get civil rights and recognition right now. But then Danica Rome and a lot of other people have begun winning consequently after, yourself included. So I mean, that gives me a lot of hope, and a lot of other trans people, I think, certainly a lot of hope to be able to run for similar kinds of positions, right? Like it's a really, really um, it gives me a lot of hope, and I think it also tends to explain like I've heard some people say like, oh my god, there's so many trans people running for political office, or I mean like so many compared to how many used to run. And I think that's because like now we're starting to get to a point in recent years, and especially like in the past just like 2 or 3, where now the public eye like is aware of us enough beyond just like a negative caricatures or stereotypes that had previously been historically predominantly associated with people in our community. That now it's actually possible to be humanized, and by virtue of being humanized, being able to be seen as not only just other people but as leaders in our communities. So I think that's really, I think that's a very interesting, like seeing that come from Danica Rome. um you mentioned that you had been involved in activism and that that was kind of what got you recommended by people to run for office. Could you explain a little bit about what that activism looked like? Because that seems to be probably kind of like the step zero, especially from the last conversation that we had. And so I think, like being able to explain what you did might help other people who are similarly interested in doing this kind of work and seeking this kind of career, like being able to figure out where you started at could help them possibly as well.
Sure. Um, well, there's a group here in Colorado called One Colorado, and it's the major LGBT organization that does advocacy and political work, and just really helps out the community in all different aspects. And they do a lobby day every year.
Mm.
And when I came out, I discovered what was going on, and I saw that they were working on a couple bills. In particular, one of them was the ban on conversion therapy, and the other one was a trans bill that would make it easier for trans people to get their documents changed, and took a lot of the barriers away for getting your birth certificate changed and your name changed, and a whole bunch of different aspects of that. And so, I was like, all right, yeah, let's go down to the Capitol and talk to my legislator. And I had never even stepped foot in the Capitol before that.
Oh, really?
So yeah, it was the first time. I had never even been in the state house building in New York where I grew up. I really kind of just paid attention to a little bit of national politics, as I think most people do, because it's what's in the news most often.
Hmm.
But state level stuff is something that people need to pay more attention to. And we need to train people to see the value in what happens at the state level, because that's what affects people the most. And so I kind of learned a lot about that by going to the lobby day, and I went to go see my legislator, and my legislator wouldn't come talk to me. He didn't come off the House floor to talk to me at all. And so I talked to somebody else's legislator, and they were happy to come talk to us. And the difference was that my legislator was a Republican, and the other legislator we talked to was a Democrat. And when it comes to areas of things that they don't want to talk about, they just ignore you. Typically, that's what happens with Republicans most of the time, not all the time. But that was a profound thing to say, like, my representative doesn't want to come talk to his constituents. And it's like, why are you there? Why do you have this job if you don't want to talk to the people you represent? I mean, when I do this job, I make the best effort that I can to meet with everybody that I can, to answer every email that I can, to answer every phone call that I can. And there's a lot, so it's really hard to do it all. But nobody's perfect, and you can't get back to everyone. But we came to visit him, and he wouldn't do it. So that was a profound moment for me to realize that my representative wasn't doing his job.
Yeah.
So I got into testifying for the bills, and I went to testify in the committees for the bills. And what happened was the ban on conversion therapy and this other bill kept getting killed every year because the Republicans controlled the Senate, and the bill kept dying every year over and over again. So I was talking to our county party people, and I got involved with the LGBT caucus there, and I said, well, I mean, look, you keep doing the same thing over and over again. Of course, you're going to see it fail because we didn't try anything new. So maybe we could do something different. And so I organized the LGBT caucus members to work on city level initiatives. So proclamations and resolutions that we could have run in different cities, and then, demonstrate that there's a lot of cities out here that believe that this is a worthwhile thing to do. And then we'll take that back to the committee next time when the bill is heard, and we'll say, look, all of these cities disagree with conversion therapy, and they don't want it in their cities. So let's ban this now. And despite getting a bunch of cities to sign on to this initiative, and that equaled hundreds of thousands of people, the Republicans killed the bill anyway. And I kind of figured that was going to happen, but at least we had to try. We had to try to do something different. So it was really the work that I did with getting these proclamations and resolutions around the state of Colorado that piqued the interest of me as a possible candidate by the chair of the party, of the county party. And she asked me to run for office, and it took a couple times for me to say yes, and it took seeing Danica win her election in 2017. But it only took me a few weeks after that to put my paperwork together and sign up. But that was kind of how I got started, and now my activism as a legislator is to show up for everybody who asks me to, for every GSA school, for every university who wants me to speak. I'm on the board of 2 nonprofits that are trans related here in Colorado, and I'm just trying to make the most good that I can do with the time that I have, because we have term limits here in Colorado, so I can only do this for so long, and then I won't be able to do it. So I want to do as much as I can while I'm in this position.
Yeah. No, and that definitely makes a lot of sense, right? It's really interesting though, because I think that a lot of people tend to have this perception of being able to get involved in politics as this like high, lofty ideal that only, the elites in society or whoever, like basically this idea that like, oh, only certain people can do that, but I'm not certain people, right? Like I'm not generally represented, or people like me generally aren't in politics. But I think it's really cool hearing your story, because you started out as like an activist, and you went around and you were banging on doors and you were trying to get the legislation passed, and just by virtue of doing that, people noticed, right? And I think that that's something that a lot of people can really take and run with, because I mean, like for people, like that's something that anyone can do, right? Like anyone can start from that position, because I mean, like for example, a lot of the things that I've been doing as far as like testifying in front of Congress. I recently got an op-ed published on getting rid of the trans panic defense abolished in Maryland, right? Like these are things that I didn't even necessarily, well, I mean, like I knew conceptually that they were possible, but I hadn't done up until recently. And it's not exceptionally hard to do, right? Anyone is able to. There's nothing special about me that made that made me able to do it compared to other people, right? And so it's really cool to hear that like you were able to do these things, and they were essentially where you got started in your political career. That's great. So I guess that where to go from there is that then to ask like, so that's how you kind of got started, and that's how you submitted your paperwork. So what was the actual race like for you? Like, how did you get support? What kind of obstacles did you face? Like what was that process like getting into a state congressional race, especially as like a trans person?
Well, my district, when it was drawn after the 2010 census, was drawn to be a Republican district. The Democrats were in control, and they drew as many Democratic districts as they could, but they couldn't draw a Democratic district in this area because it was too many Republicans. So District 27 was supposed to be the Republican district that we would have to give away. And it was the Democrat that was the incumbent coming into the new district didn't win, and a Republican won. So it was pretty pretty large numbers of Republicans in the district compared to Democrats. Uh, Unaffiliated voters have always been the largest margin, but Republicans were the second highest when I started looking at the district in 2017, when I started looking at the numbers. But the one thing that I looked at that was interesting to me, that I felt like gave me the opportunity to win, was that in 2016, in my district, Hillary Clinton won, I think by like 12 votes or something like that. So it's a really tiny, tiny margin. But still, you only have to win by one. And so,
Yep.
I said, if they would vote for Hillary Clinton and they really don't like Donald Trump, then they probably would vote for me, because they're really, not really satisfied with the Republicans. So what we did, and it was really tough for me because in the 2016 election, the Republican won by 14% with a third party candidate taking 5. So it was a libertarian candidate, which usually takes some Republican votes away. So it was a huge margin. So when I put my paperwork together and decided to run, nobody expected me to even come close to winning. Most people, even Democrats, are like, "Oh, well, that's great, you're running, but yeah, okay, well, you're never going to win." So we were not disparaged by this. We were going to do everything that we could. I got some training from Emerge Colorado, which is a training organization for women. I also went to get some training from the Victory Institute, which is for LGBT candidates, because there's a little bit different things you have to know about when you're running as an LGBT person. And using that training, I was doing a lot of the work myself. I was actually still working full time and finishing the last class of my master's degree in 2018. So I was doing all that as well. And I didn't have a campaign manager until probably June. So I was just kind of just doing everything that I could myself. I wasn't getting a lot of people excited about the race because they didn't think I was going to win. So nobody really wanted to invest a lot of time. But my campaign manager came off of an election that he didn't win in the caucus. His candidate lost by 1 vote in the caucus, and he was really kind of bummed. And he's like, he was ready to go, ready to do some work, and he said, "Hey, you looking for a campaign manager? I'm looking for a win, and let's get this done, and let's pull the win." So we did everything that we had to do, and because I wasn't somebody who was on the radar to win, I didn't get national coverage really on the news. I didn't get a lot of contributions from even strong Democrats in the county party or anywhere else. It was really, really hard to get any kind of momentum going because I wasn't going to win. And that's what everybody kept saying. So we said, well, whatever, we're going to do everything we can. And a lot of the work we did in-house. We designed our mail ourselves using Photoshop and Illustrator. We designed, we had logos designed by people who wanted to volunteer. Everything that we did as cheaply as we possibly could. And we actually ended up winning the election with only like $73,000, which was pretty amazing.
Wow. Yeah.
Considering that, we flipped the district for on the cheap. So in the beginning, I was running against the incumbent, the guy who won by 14% before. And the interesting thing was that in 2018, it was the first year that unaffiliated voters were able to vote in the primary. So now we had a huge group of people who were going to take either the Republican or Democratic primary ballot and vote on it. So I was running unopposed, as well as the Republican incumbent. But when the primary vote ballots were cast, I had more votes than he did. So I think I had like 9,700 votes and he had 8,800 votes. So the Republicans weren't voting for him in large enough numbers than the Democrats and the unaffiliateds were voting for me. So that was a really good sign that there was being a shift more towards Democratic side. And at that point, the guy running for governor on the Republican side hadn't picked a lieutenant governor, because we don't elect a lieutenant governor. They're picked by the candidate for governor, and then they just run as a ticket together. And he chose my opponent. So my opponent, who had the advantage in the race as the incumbent, who was a fairly moderate Republican, was swept out and went to go run for lieutenant governor. So the Republicans had to scramble and find someone else to fill the seat, but still, they didn't expect me to win. So, I mean, they put someone in there, and she didn't do anything. She didn't do like any campaigning at all.
Really?
No, because I'm sure that when they told her in the vacancy committee, they're like, "Don't worry, you're going to be the next representative. There's no way you're going to lose." I'm sure they told her that, because nobody would have sat around and did nothing if they weren't told that.
Yeah.
So
Unfortunately, I
we
mean,
did a
like,
minimal amount of campaigning, and we did a ton. We knocked on, we did like 50,000 attempts at the doors. And we sent out the mail, and we did calls, and we did everything that we had to do. And I'm a pretty strong candidate. I have a lot to offer people as a scientist. I have 4 college degrees, 2 master's degrees. Um, I understand things pretty quickly, and I can speak about them, pretty well. Even though I've never had a lot of experience in politics, you catch on.
Sure.
And the people chose me by 439 votes. But because we have all mail-in ballots on election night, there were so many ballots cast that not all of the ballots could be counted all on election night. So they had to count them over the next couple days. And on election night, I was actually losing the election by 221 votes. So my opponent had a victory party, and then the votes started coming in the next day, and her lead started to shrink and narrow. And I was only winning by 7 votes at one point, and then it started to really come in, and those last minute voters who were mostly Democrats, we chased after them. Where's your ballot? Turn in your ballot. Took me back over to 439 over her count, and we clinched it and didn't have to do a recount or anything, which was always a good thing.
That's amazing. I mean, like, I think that what's interesting to me about this story, I mean, that there's several things, right? The first is the fact that, like, there was probably like there was a degree of underestimation, at least from what I'm able to take from what you're telling me, right? Which isn't surprising, right? Like I can fully understand. I know, unfortunately, many people who are Republican. I don't know. It's very hard to not to talk about this, but I mean, like, the fact of the matter is, I can understand why there's a lot of people in the party or in the Republican Party in Colorado, or just in general, who would hear the idea of, oh, you're running against a trans woman, and then automatically assume that person is going to win, right? Kind of going back to what we had been talking about earlier, before Danica Rome won. We really didn't have anyone going out from our community and being able to run and win these kinds of elections to begin with, right? And so this is all not only very new to us in terms of being able to go out and be successful, but also the fact that, like, we're just now starting to get recognition, like I was saying earlier, in the public eye, beyond just like the stereotypes that have been broadly previously very popular, which is all good, right? Because I mean, like, you were able to do it. You were able to show them, no, actually, like, we're gonna come and we're gonna show up and we're gonna fucking kick ass and take names and win. And that sets a really good precedent, because not only are we able to not only should they not underestimate us, right? Not only is that a major lesson to take from this, but also the fact that, we're able to show that, like, practically speaking, well, I mean, like, you in this case, you were able to show that, like, you were able to get people to listen and, like, look to you as a leader of this community. And that's amazing. That's an inspiration for a lot of people. I mean, like myself, but a lot of people who are watching right now as well. I think it's very hard to conceptualize, especially, like, for me, when I'm obviously, I wouldn't expect you to, like, be familiar with my content, but I debate a lot of people who have very negative opinions about trans people, right? And I think it's very common for people who watch me and see me, debate those people, to have, like, it's very hard when you're constantly subjected to those negative kinds of arguments to be able to see the positive things that our community can produce as well. So I think that's a wonderful example. Anyway, to make, all right, so a substantive question then. So you're able to go in and you were able to win, and that's wonderful. What has it been like serving? What has it been like serving in your capacity since you've been elected? And have you had I'm very curious, have you encountered, like, any specific, like, opposition or pushback by virtue of the fact that you are trans from other people in the legislature?
Well, I mean, my circumstances of winning was kind of unique. So I think that, if I had won by a bigger margin, I may have been treated a little bit differently off the bat. But because I won by such a small margin, I was kind of treated as someone who's like, oh, you got lucky this time. You know, don't worry, we're going to get rid of you in 2020. I knew they were plotting to do that because they didn't want me there. I tried to do the best I could, making relationships with people on the other side of the aisle, and it was challenging because what's what's unfortunate is like the the number of people in the Republican Party in the House in Colorado. There's not a lot of moderate people. The folks that are being elected are have pretty extreme views in a lot of cases because
Really?
there are areas of Colorado that are so red that they win by like 78% of the vote. So when you win by 78% of the vote, you pretty much do whatever you want and say whatever you want, and you can always get away with it.
Right.
So they have a bit of raw honesty, I guess, which could be not very nice. Uh,
Yeah.
Most people, though, were so they kept their decorum. Let's put it that way. Unlike some of the things we've seen with our Congresswoman in Congressional District 3, uh, who is Lauren Boebert. You've probably heard of her. She's been in the news a bit lately.
Yeah.
Um, but
Um,
um,
Go
but
ahead.
some of my colleagues that I worked with, they didn't have to say nasty things to my face. They would run bills like you know things about sports, trans people in sports, and saying that making doctors criminals for helping trans people who are young and trying to seek medical help. You know
Yeah.
these
Um,
kinds of things.
yeah.
And every once in a while, when we do our second reading of bills, and I get up to the chair position. So basically, what happens is one of the members takes the position of the speaker, and they preside over the House. So every member in the House is under the control of the chair of the committee of the whole, and that's the position I would take every once in a while. So if somebody wants to speak, they have to ask me first. That's how it worked. So you would go down in the well and you would raise your hand up, and I would call on the person. And there were a couple members that did not like to refer to me as Madam Chair. And the the process that happens is, if you were down there raising your hand, I would say, Representative Roshong, and then you would say, thank you, Madam Chair, and then you would say what you wanted to say. That's just the tradition that we do.
Yeah.
Well, there are a couple members that just could not bring themselves to do it.
Would they
They
like
they would
openly misgender you, or what would they do?
sometimes yes, but most of the time they would just say thank you or thank you, Chair, but they would not call me Madam Chair. They just couldn't do it. And it's like such a simple little thing, but they wouldn't do it. And then sometimes they would just do it on purpose. And I know they would do it on purpose because I could see the look on their face when they said it. It wasn't an accident. I know. And you know what? I always let people get away with it probably once before I get the gavel and I start gaveling them down. And then if they continue, I can fine them in the position of chair. But they only do it just once, just because they know they'll get away with it.
Yep.
And that's the kind of stuff that I would, passive aggressive stuff and little microaggressions and things like that you experience.
Yeah, it really bothers me because I mean, a lot of this is genuinely like, I mean, it's a reflection of people acting in bad faith, right? Um, there's, I recently I had on someone a couple months ago, who I debated, and it really sucks because, like, honestly, like, I know that there are plenty of people out there who don't see me or like, and like trans people as who they say that they are, right? Like, there are plenty of people who think like that, and unfortunately, that is a mainstream political opinion because that's the world we live in right now, unfortunately. But sometimes I would much rather just have the brutal honesty because then I can, then you can have some degree of accountability, right? You can just like point out like, hey, this person is being openly transphobic or bigoted or et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, right? But then usually like when someone is acting in bad faith, namely when they are misrepresenting their views intentionally, um, and like using another basis to try and formulate their views so you can't actually hold them accountable to them, it's a lot harder then, right? Because like they will do these things and everyone knows what's up. But they will specifically, they'll do the song and dance of, oh, I didn't mean it. Oh, I was just, I didn't
Hmm.
even think about it. Oh, that didn't even cross my mind. I'm so sorry. But they know what's up, and they know exactly what they're doing. And it really sucks because I mean, like, we are in a position where, and I'm not sure if this is something that can necessarily be resolved like through like Senate or like committee or hearing rules. But I mean, like, it does suck because I mean, like, essentially we have a lot of people who will not recognize like a basic part of your humanity or our humanity, even though you have gone through the process and you have won, you've won the opportunity to be there and be a representative the same as anyone else there. Like, that's sickening to me. I'm sorry, that's a little
Yeah.
minor rant, minor tangent, but I mean, it is very frustrating to hear that. That they do not
Well,
respect your gender the same way they recognize and respect everyone else's in the room.
yeah. And the funny thing was is that there was um, the minority leader. He actually called me Madam Chair. He actually did the right thing.
Yeah. All right.
But in my reelection campaign, he was the one that was behind the nasty transphobic dead naming attack ad that came out against me. And one of the other people who wouldn't use the right pronouns for me, uh, he also did a nasty attack ad, and he did a robocall. Like it was his last term, so he wasn't coming back anyway. The coward. And he did a robocall, basically saying all the tropes about trans people that we're gonna get you. We're gonna wait till you go in the bathroom. We're gonna get you. Like all those things. Um, he said in that robocall, and you know what? Both of those attack ads ended up backfiring big time because people saw it as ridiculous. I had a great track record of doing bills that help the people of my community. I know what my community wants, and I deliver for them. And the people in the district understand that, and they know that, and they weren't buying into it.
That is really good to hear. I mean, like, one of the things I worry about, I mean, like, obviously, there's a lot of things I worry about as far as like being a public figure and being trans in the public eye. But I mean, like, obviously, that was something that I was curious about when we had talked the first time. Um, was kind of how to deal with those kind of attack ads if they come up. Obviously, I would like to think that though that people would not like succumb to those kind of transphobic ad homs because they are literally just fear mongering, baseless fear mongering. And so I certainly hope that that's something that eventually people from our community will not have to deal with. But I think it is essential to recognize that unfortunately these views are prevalent enough in our society right now that at least in the short term it's good to learn how to be able to deal with them as they come. So you said that they weren't successful because your community, your constituents were able to sort of like see through them. How were you affected? And we don't have to talk about this if this is personal, but I'm curious just for other people who are watching who may have to deal with something similar in the future, or myself, because I might have to deal with something similar in the future. Like, how did you deal with it on a personal level? And then how did your reelection campaign deal with or respond to these? Like, did you have like responses formally? Did you ignore it and just expect that people would catch on? Like, how did you deal with like specifically transphobic attacks from the opposition in terms of your reelection?
Well, I mean, I found out about the Facebook ad. That was a video ad that came out through actually the Group One Colorado. They sent me a text and said, "Hey, you should be aware there's this negative attack ad against you." And it was we caught it pretty early, and that's really important. Is like to catch these kinds of things early if you can, and then you can message around them. Um, when I watched the ad, I mean, it was, I mean, you get like it takes your breath away a little bit, thinking like, oh my God, I can't believe this is like that they're actually doing this, that they're saying these things, and it hurt me. They did, they got that.
Mm-hmm.
They got me. They hurt me. Okay. And, I talked to my wife and, told her about it. And I talked to my campaign manager about it. And then I started reaching out to the Victory Institute and to, the people in the party who are working with me on my reelection, to really just try to come up with, what do we do next? How do we handle this? What do we do with this? Um, the particulars in the one ad was about a a police report that they dug up that had my dead name on it, and it said I did nothing. That's what the police report said. Like I did nothing wrong, but they still tried to frame it as if I did something wrong, and that there was a police report. Period. That was all that needed to be said, even though there was no charge, was nothing happened. Like I did everything right. I handled the situation perfectly. I was trying to become an FBI special agent at that time. You think I would do something stupid to jeopardize that? No, I wouldn't. And that's why the police report was basically said nothing happened. I did nothing wrong. But here it was. And now, do I explain it? Do I I mean, it's like I didn't really know what to do, and I wasn't really thinking quite rationally at the time. So I need some other people to kind of analyze what was in this thing and what they said and how it was, and then we collectively came up with a response to it, basically saying like, well, look, the police report said you did nothing wrong. There's nothing to say sorry about. There's nothing to defend yourself about because it's self-explanatory. You read the report, it says you did nothing. So, we don't need to apologize. You don't need to do anything like that. We just need to say that, they're trying to say that I'm a violent person and, they dead name me right out of the, I mean, they're using all the same tropes.
Yeah.
Oh, trans people are bad. They're going to get you. It's like, it's so comical that we're the people that are going to get everybody, but we're the people who are victimized all the time by the police and everybody else.
Mm-hmm.
But we came up with a statement. We notified a few people in the media that we trusted, that, and we asked them not to repeat the ad, not to link to the ad, to mention vague things about it, because we don't want to propagate and give them free advertising on what they're trying to sell. So we framed it really well, and we had our trusted reporters that we could reach out to that wouldn't blow it out of proportion so we could get ahead of it. We didn't want any conservative outlets getting a hold of that and blowing it up, because that could have happened. If we get to it and we debunk it and we put water on the fire early, then we're just bringing to the attention that those bad people are saying lies and horrible things and transphobic tropes about Representative Titone, and she didn't do anything. So we should be upset about this. We should be angry that they're stooping to this level because they're so desperate to try to win. And that was what we came up with. And you know, there obviously are some people that buy into the crap no matter what kind of stuff you're shoveling. And it did, rile up some people, and some comments and stuff on Facebook were said, and they were horrible too. But for the most part, I got a lot of sympathy. I got a lot of people uh, coming to my support and sending money. I ended up, raising probably close to $20,000 in about a week, which for a campaign that can only accept $400 at a time, that's pretty good. That's like really good. Like I ended up buying a cable ad because I got money to do it because of that negative ad. So that really backfired on that.
That's really cool. This reminds me a lot of, because I mean, like, I think so. If, like, I'm imagining the calculus that's going on in their heads, right? And their calculus was probably there are enough Republicans in this district that an attack ad that's based on fears which are common among Republicans or people who are conservative generally would probably get a net positive, right? But I think it's cool in your case because you were able to elicit sympathy and like an understanding from your constituents that these were baseless fear, like it was baseless fear mongering, right? It reminds me a lot of the people who I had grown up around, because I had grown up, I think I mentioned this to you the last time we talked, in a relatively conservative town where, pretty homogenous, cis, het, white, all that good stuff. But I was really close to a lot of people who I had grown up with. And so when I had finally come out, I expected that I wouldn't actually be able to maintain a relationship. Like I thought I was basically going to have to cut ties with everyone from my hometown. But surprisingly, a lot of them actually turn around and were immediately like, oh, well, I like you, so I know that being trans must be okay. And so it's interesting because I think that for a lot of people, really what it ends up taking is they, come from more conservative backgrounds. Yeah, I got you. So I think that for people who have come from like conservative backgrounds and don't know as well, being able to have like a relationship to some degree with someone who can, be personalized and who they can understand can be can go a long way in being able to address preemptively some of those kind of transphobic ad hom attacks.
Yeah, oh, that's exactly it. It was, yeah, they're ugly, and I worried a little bit because there were some candidates that actually lost their elections because of attack ads in the leading elections coming up to the general. So in the back of my mind, and as close as my race was, you know, these kinds of things can tip the scale. But we ended up handling it really, really well to bring it back to our side.
Yeah, that makes sense. Well, hey, I know that you have a hard stop at 5 your time. I guess that my last question is then to kind of summarize, because I usually try to like take the conversations I have and make it into like the audience will be able to take a ton from what we've already talked about. But do you have any other final recommendations for people who are looking to be able to get into the same line of work that you are doing, and especially if they come from similar backgrounds?
Yeah, it's important to really know your community the best you can. I actually I didn't really know anybody before I got started running for office too, which is definitely something I would recommend. Don't do that. Like, get to know people, find out who the influencers are, show up to different events, be be everywhere and try to get to meet everybody you can. Because the more that you're a fixture around the place where you're running, you become somebody who everybody knows and everybody sees and shows up and it's always there. And that gives just an appearance off the bat that you belong there because you're already there. You're all over the place. And that was one of my strategies when I ran, when I was a candidate, that I mean my schedule was packed. I was going from one thing to the next thing to the next thing, and just being all over the place. And everybody's like, wow, like I see you at every event. I'm like, yeah, I know. I have to be at every event. It's like this is important. Um, but you know, if you do some volunteer work where you're going to be running, whether it's city or state level stuff, that comes in handy, showing that you're invested in the community that you live in. Uh, Finding out what what people really want, what the issues are, and then talking about those issues, and really getting knowledgeable about them. I realized that education was a big issue, K through 12 education and healthcare and the environment. Those are some of the top issues in my district. So, being a scientist really helped me in the area of climate change and the environment. So that was helpful. But if you're deficient in any of those areas, become familiar with it. If you're running for city council, go to the city council meetings, or now that they're online, listen to them, watch videos of the old recorded sessions. All of those things are going to really just kind of give you a better understanding about what they're talking about, how they're talking about it, how people react to things, and you're going to really get an understanding of what the position you're trying to fill is actually going to be. So it, that's what I wish I would have done more of if I had the time. But I kind of just jumped in head first. But you can jump in head first too. It's just going to be harder. But if you spend a little bit of time building up, your reputation and your knowledge, that's going to go a long way of really, getting people to really say like, oh yeah, I know you. You're everywhere, and I believe you. I trust you. I know who you are, and you're not just like somebody who just showed up last week and now is running for some office, which makes it a little bit more difficult because you're not an outsider. You're someone who's really there all the time.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Well, hey, thank you so much. I know that I've gotten a lot of feedback from, I'm watching my live chat, and they're saying that this has been one of the best conversations that they've seen on my
Cool.
channel and on my
Awesome.
platform. So I really, really appreciate it. And I think that a lot of people, I think that this is absolutely invaluable information. So I was really excited when we had talked a couple weeks ago about the prospect of getting you on here just to be able to like share some of your experience. So thank you again so much for taking time out of your Saturday. I know you have a hard stop at 5. So thank you so much, Representative Titone. I really appreciate you coming on, and I hope that you have a absolutely wonderful rest of your Saturday evening.
Thanks very much. Same to you, and let's do this again.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, you have my number and I have your number. That's great. Yeah, we can absolutely do this again. I would love to do that. Thank you.
Cool. All right. Well, thanks for having me on. Bye bye, everybody.
Bye.